I discovered my husband had lost everything to gambling, hiding debts that nearly pushed us into bankruptcy. And when I confronted him about his lies, he tried to paint me as crazy in front of his entire family. But what he never expected was that I had already gathered all the evidence, hired an attorney, and laid out a plan that would not only save me from financial ruin, but expose every single one of his lies to everyone he had manipulated into taking his side. And the look on his face when he realized I knew everything, that he had utterly lost control, was the most liberating moment of my life. Because I was no longer the naive wife who fell for his excuses. I was the woman who had taken the reins of her own destiny and proved that no one, absolutely no one, would destroy everything I had worked hard for without facing the consequences. And today, looking back, I am grateful to have found the strength not just to survive, but to rise from the very ashes he tried to bury me in. I was sitting in my mother-in-law's living room, surrounded by my husband's entire family, and he was standing over me, jabbing a finger in my face as he screamed that I was crazy, paranoid, that I was making things up because I couldn't handle him needing space. And all of them, his mother, his sister, even cousins I barely knew, were looking at me with that expression of pity mixed with contempt, as if I were some hysterical woman incapable of holding her marriage together. And my mother-in-law took his hand with that protective gesture of a mother defending her son and said in a firm voice that I needed to stop accusing him with proof, that he was a hard-working, dedicated man, and my jealousy and insecurities were destroying their marriage. And I felt my heart racing, my hands shaking, that heat rising up my neck and into my face, because for years I had swallowed his excuses, his lies, the strange hours, the money that would just disappear. And now I was being painted as the villain of the story, the troubled wife who couldn't trust her perfect husband. And for a second, I almost believed it. I almost let the narrative he had so carefully constructed swallow me whole again. But then I looked into his eyes, saw that glint of satisfaction, that certainty that he had won once more, that he had successfully turned everyone against me. And something inside me just snapped, not out of desperation, but with absolute clarity. I slowly opened my purse, felt the weight of the envelopes I'd been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment, and I started to lay out paper after paper on the coffee table. Bank statements, betting slips, screenshots of conversations, loan agreements I never even knew existed. And the silence that fell over that room was so thick I could hear my own heart beating. I saw the color draining from his face, his mother dropping his hand as if she'd been burned, his sister leaning in to see the papers with wide eyes. And I took a deep breath before I spoke, my voice coming out much steadier than I ever expected. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being here and sharing this moment with me. You have no idea what it means to me to be able to tell this story and know that maybe it can help someone who's going through something similar, someone who feels alone, who doubts themselves, who is being manipulated and can't see it. And for that reason, I'm asking you from the bottom of my heart, if you're getting something out of this content, if this resonates with you, or you know someone who needs to hear it, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos, and leave a like because it helps so much in spreading this message to more people who need it. I created this space for that very reason, to share real stories of overcoming adversity, of women and men who faced difficult situations and found the strength to rebuild their lives. Because no one should have to go through these things alone. And the more united we are as a community, the stronger each of us becomes. So please, become part of our family here on the channel. And now let's get back to that crucial moment in my mother-in-law's living room, because what happened next completely changed the course of my life. And to understand how I got to that point, holding those papers that would expose every single one of his lies, I need to go back to the beginning and tell you how it all started. I met Michael 8 years ago at a barbecue with mutual friends. He was charming, attentive, made everyone laugh with his jokes. And when he started talking to me that night, I felt special, like I was the only person at the party. He asked about my life, my dreams, my job as a teacher, and seemed genuinely interested in every word I said. We started dating 3 months later, and for the first year, everything was perfect. He would show up at my apartment with flowers for no reason, plan romantic surprises, and introduced me to his family, who welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Marlene, always said I was the daughter-in-law she had prayed for, and his sister, Jessica, became a close friend, or so I thought at the time. We got married after 2 years of dating in a beautiful ceremony that he insisted on helping plan, down to the last detail. And for the first few months of our marriage, everything was still wonderful. We lived in a comfortable rented apartment, I worked at a public school, and he was a salesman at an electronics store. Our salaries combined were enough to live comfortably and still save a little each month because we dreamed of buying our own house. But it was about 6 months into the marriage that I started to notice subtle changes. He would come home from work later and later with excuses about extra meetings or happy hour with coworkers. He started getting easily irritated over small things, and whenever I asked if everything was okay, he would say it was just stress from work and that I was being dramatic. The first time something really scared me was when I went to the bank to make a deposit and discovered our joint account was nearly empty. I asked him about it, and he explained he'd had some unexpected car expenses and that he'd replace it the following month. I believed him because I had no reason not to. After all, he was my husband, the man I loved and had built a life with. But the money never came back. And the next month, the same thing happened. When I confronted him the second time, he got angry, said I was being too controlling, that he had a right to spend his own money, and that I needed to trust him more. And like an idiot, I apologized. I actually apologized for being worried about our finances. I started putting my salary into a separate account I opened in secret, just as a precaution. And that's what saved me later on. The late nights became more frequent. He started going out on weekends, saying he was meeting friends, coming home in the early hours of the morning, or sometimes not until the next day. And when I complained, he would say I was being possessive, that he needed space, that just because we were married didn't mean he had to give up his social life. And his family always backed this narrative. Marlene would say that men need their freedom, that I had to be more understanding. Jessica would comment that I was too jealous and that it pushed men away. And I started to believe the problem really was me, that I was being a nagging, controlling wife. I started to police myself, to stop complaining, to accept everything in silence. But inside, I was falling apart. The financial situation got worse and worse. Collection notices started arriving at our address, overdue bills, threats of having our utilities shut off. And when I showed them to him, scared and worried, he would blow up, saying I was exaggerating things, that he would handle it, that I didn't need to worry about it because it was his responsibility. There was one time I came home early and found him on the computer on a strange website. When I asked what it was, he quickly closed the screen and said he was just browsing. But I'd seen numbers, charts, something that looked like betting. I questioned him, and he laughed in my face, said I was seeing things, that I was getting paranoid. And again, I believed him, because it was easier to believe than to face the possibility that my marriage was crumbling. My life became a routine of constant anxiety. I would wake up in the middle of the night to check if he was home. I'd spend my days at school trying to focus on my classes, but my mind would be racing, thinking about home. And I'd rush back to see if there was a new letter, a new debt, a new problem. We stopped doing anything together. We didn't go out anymore. We didn't talk anymore. I was living in my anguish, and he was living in his own parallel world. And whenever I tried to have a serious conversation about our situation, he would turn it around on me. He'd say I was the problem, that my negativity was ruining the marriage, that if I were more lighthearted and positive like I used to be, he would want to be home more. And I believed him. I truly believed it was my fault. I started seeing a therapist because I thought I was going crazy. She was the first person to tell me that this wasn't normal, that I was a victim of emotional manipulation. But even then, I couldn't fully accept it. I loved him, or I loved the idea of him, the person he had been at the beginning. And I kept trying to save our marriage by myself, while he just kept sinking us deeper and deeper.
The exact moment everything changed was on a rainy Tuesday in April. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when the phone rang. It was an unknown number, and on the other end, a rough male voice asked for Michael. I said he wasn't there, and the voice replied that it was the third time they had called, that if Michael didn't pay the $50,000 he owed by the end of the week, things would get ugly. And before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there, paralyzed, staring at the phone in my hand. $50,000? That was more than I made in 2 years of work. How could a debt that large possibly exist without my knowledge? My first instinct was to call him immediately, to confront him, to demand an explanation. But something held me back, a voice inside my head telling me not to do it, to be smarter this time. I needed to understand the full extent of the problem before I acted. So that night, when he came home, I said nothing. I acted completely normal, made dinner, we talked about trivial things, and when he went to sleep, I stayed up on the couch, thinking about everything that had happened over the last few years. All the lies, all the excuses, all the times he had made me feel crazy. And I realized I could no longer trust a single word he said. I needed concrete proof. The next day, I took a leave of absence from school, claiming health issues, and began my investigation. First, I went to the bank where we had our joint account. I asked for detailed statements for the last 2 years. The manager got a concerned look on her face when she saw the numbers, but she gave me everything. Then I started pulling his public credit and debt records, and what I found made the floor drop out from under my feet. There were loans from at least 4 different banks, credit cards I never even knew existed, all maxed out, financing agreements, debts to online betting sites. The total was over $200,000. It was an unthinkable, absurd amount, enough to buy a house, and he had literally gambled it all away. Because there it was, the proof that he was frequenting sports betting sites, online casinos, bingo parlors, everything you could possibly imagine. I came home shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from a rage so pure and concentrated I had never felt anything like it before. This man hadn't just destroyed our financial life, he had made me believe I was the problem. He had manipulated me, isolated me, used my money to patch the holes he himself was creating. And now here I was, trapped in a failed marriage with debts that would take decades to pay off. But then I stopped. I took a deep breath, and I thought, I will not be the victim in this story. I will not let him drag me down into this hole with him. In that moment, a plan was born in my mind. I wasn't just going to confront him and ask for a divorce, because he would deny everything. He would say I was exaggerating. He would manipulate his family into taking his side like he always did. I needed something bigger, more definitive. I needed to expose every one of his lies in a way no one to dispute. I started by making copies of absolutely everything, every statement, every collection notice, every receipt. I stored it all in a folder that I hid at my mother's house. Then I found a lawyer specializing in divorce and family law. I explained the whole situation, and he advised me on how to protect myself legally. He said I needed to prove I had no knowledge of these debts so I wouldn't be held responsible for them, and that the more documentation I had, the better my case would be. I followed his every instruction to the letter. I opened a new bank account at a different bank and had my entire paycheck deposited there. I canceled all our joint credit cards. I started saving money for the legal fees. And through all of this, I continued living with Michael, pretending nothing had changed. It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, to look him in the face every day, knowing everything he had done and not being able to say anything yet. But I knew I had to be patient, that if I acted impulsively, he would find a way to get out of it, just like he always did. I also started documenting everything. I recorded conversations when he came home late, when he lied about where he'd been. I wrote down dates and times for every strange occurrence. I took pictures of suspicious messages on his phone when he left it unlocked. I became a detective in my own life. And the more I discovered, the worse it got. I found conversations with loan officers, with loan sharks, even with people he owed who were threatening to take more drastic measures. My husband wasn't just a gambling addict. He had gotten involved with dangerous people. He was putting our lives at risk. And yet he would still come home and look me in the eye and tell me he loved me, that everything would be okay, that I just needed to have faith in him. The hypocrisy was sickening, but I smiled, I nodded, I waited for my moment. It took 3 months of meticulous preparation, 3 months of living a lie. But I knew I was doing the right thing. My therapist supported me through the whole process. She told me I was being brave and smart. And my mother, who was the only person who knew everything, offered me all the emotional and even financial support I might need. The final trigger to execute my plan was when I discovered that Michael had started using my name to get more credit. He had forged my signature on documents. He had made me a co-signer on loans I never authorized. This was no longer just financial irresponsibility. It was a crime, and I was not going to let him drag me to jail with him. So I set up a meeting with my lawyer, we finalized all the divorce papers, we prepared the criminal complaint for fraud, and I decided that the confrontation would happen in front of his entire family. Not because I wanted to publicly humiliate him, but because I needed everyone who had always taken his side, who had always made me feel guilty, to see him for exactly who he was. The first step of my plan was to ensure that I had every single piece of evidence organized in an irrefutable way. I spent a whole weekend at my mother's house while Michael thought I was at a teacher's retreat, and the two of us sat at her table and cataloged every document, every statement, every receipt. We separated everything by category: bank debts in one folder, loans from loan sharks in another, online betting in a third, and the documents forged with my signature in a special red folder, because they were evidence of a crime. My mother cried several times during this process, seeing the sheer scale of what he had done. But she hugged me and told me I was the strongest woman she knew and that she would support me to the very end. After that, I went and filed a public affidavit, a legal document my lawyer had advised would be crucial to protect me, declaring that I had no knowledge of and was not responsible for any debt incurred by Michael without my expressed authorization. The next step was the riskiest. I needed at least one witness who could confirm his gambling addiction. So I reached out to Mark, who had been Michael's best friend since they were teenagers, but had grown distant in recent years. I arranged to have coffee with him, and when I asked if he knew anything about Michael having a gambling problem, he sighed in relief, as if he had been waiting years to be able to talk about it. He told me Michael had started betting back when he was single. It started small with sports bets and just escalated. Mark had tried to warn him several times, but Michael always denied it was a problem, said he had everything under control. Until one day he asked to borrow money from Mark, promising to pay it back in a week because he had a sure bet. Mark lent him $5,000 and never saw the money again. When he asked for it back, Michael got aggressive, said he wasn't a real friend, and their friendship ended right there. Mark felt guilty for not having told me sooner, but I explained it wasn't his fault, that Michael was a master of manipulation and concealment. I asked if he would be willing to provide a written statement about all of this, and he agreed immediately, saying he wanted to help because I didn't deserve to go through this. With Mark's statement in hand, I had an outside witness who wasn't an interested party in the divorce, which gave my case much more credibility. The next hurdle was getting access to Michael's phone to recover messages and records he had certainly deleted. I knew he had automatic cloud backups, so one night when he was asleep, I took his phone, noted down his email and password, and the next day I accessed everything from my computer. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Conversations with other gamblers swapping tips, messages to loan sharks begging for more time, screenshots of overdue bills, and worst of all, messages to Jessica, my sister-in-law, where he asked to borrow money and she would send it via bank transfer, which meant his family knew. At least Jessica knew, and she never told me. She continued to be my friend to my face while financing her brother's addiction behind my back. That gave me even more resolve. I saved everything to a flash drive, backed it up in 3 different places because I couldn't risk losing that evidence. Parallel to all of this, I started attending his family gatherings more frequently. I needed everyone to be present when the moment of confrontation arrived. So, whenever Marlene scheduled a Sunday lunch, I went. Whenever there was a birthday or a celebration, I was there, being the perfect, friendly, polite daughter-in-law, bringing dessert, helping in the kitchen, winning everyone over. And Michael loved it. He thought I had finally accepted the submissive wife role he wanted. Little did he know, I was building my audience. There was one Sunday that was particularly difficult. Marlene was talking about what a wonderful, hardworking, responsible son Michael was, and I had to bite my tongue so hard I tasted blood. But I smiled, I agreed, I eyed my husband, and inside I was counting down the days until I would completely destroy that narrative. Jessica would sometimes look at me with a strange expression, as if she pitied me or felt guilty, but she never said a word, never had the courage to come to me and tell the truth, and that showed me that none of them really cared about me. I was just the wife, the piece of furniture that completed the perfect family they pretended to be. Meanwhile, the debts kept piling up. The collection calls became more and more aggressive. One day, a man showed up at our front door looking for Michael. When I said he wasn't there, the man looked me up and down and said that if Michael didn't pay by Friday, they would have to take action. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. That night, I confronted Michael about the man, and he exploded, screaming at me that I shouldn't have opened the door, that I had put us in danger, that I was stupid and reckless. And for the first time in my life, I screamed back. I told him I wasn't the one putting us in danger, that he needed to tell me exactly who he owed and how much. And he pushed me. It wasn't hard, it didn't hurt, but it was enough to make me stumble backward. And he realized what he had done. He tried to hug me, to apologize, to say he was just stressed, but I pulled away, locked myself in the bedroom, and that night I knew there was no going back. There was no possible redemption for this marriage. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The next day, I called my lawyer and told him I was ready to execute the plan. He told me to pick a date and arrange for the family to be gathered. The perfect opportunity arose 2 weeks later, when Marlene announced she was having a special lunch to celebrate her wedding anniversary. She said she wanted the whole family together, and I immediately offered to help with the arrangements, thus ensuring the event would actually happen and that everyone would be present. In the weeks leading up to the lunch, I finalized all the divorce documents. My lawyer prepared a formal legal notice to be served to Michael the day after the confrontation. I also contacted some of the larger creditors, explained my situation, showed them the public affidavit that absolved me of the debts, and asked that they direct all collections solely to Michael. Some were understanding, others not so much. But the important thing was to have it on record that I was taking every legal measure to protect myself. I bought a small voice recorder that fit in the palm of my hand and tested it several times to make sure it worked perfectly. On the day of the confrontation, I was going to record everything, every word, every reaction, because I knew that afterward Michael would try to twist the story, say I had exaggerated or made things up. I also prepared copies of all the most important documents, a folder for each family member, so that when I walked out of that house, every single one of them would have in their hands the physical proof of what Michael had done. The night before the lunch, I could barely sleep. I kept mentally rehearsing every step, every line, every document I needed to present in the right order. I was afraid I would forget something crucial, that I would freeze up, that I would let my emotions overwhelm me. But then I remembered everything I had been through, all the years of being manipulated, humiliated, played for a fool, and I felt that cold, calculated anger return, giving me strength and clarity. On Sunday morning, I woke up early, got ready with care. I chose a sober, elegant outfit, put my hair up, applied light makeup. I wanted to look composed, controlled, credible. I put the folders with the documents into a large tote bag along with a few gifts I'd bought as a cover. I activated the recorder and put it in my jacket pocket, and I left the house with Michael, who was in a good mood, cracking jokes in the car, saying this was going to be a special day. And I agreed, in silence, thinking he had no idea just how special this day would truly be. We arrived at Marlene's house around noon. The living room was full. Besides my mother-in-law and Jessica, her husband Robert was there, their 2 children, Aunt Beatrice, who was Marlene's sister, and 3 or 4 of Michael's cousins I knew by sight. I greeted everyone with my warmest smile, helped set the table, served drinks, did everything a perfect daughter-in-law would do. And during lunch, I participated in the conversations, laughed at the jokes, complimented the food, all while my tote bag with the documents sat there in the corner of the room waiting for the right moment. After dessert, Marlene began an emotional speech about family, about how important it was to have everyone together, about how she and her late husband had always dreamed of having a united and loving family. And it was at that moment that Michael stood up, put his hand on my shoulder, and said he wanted to take the opportunity to say something. My heart started pounding because I wasn't expecting this. He began by saying our marriage was going through a difficult phase, that I was very stressed with work and it was affecting our relationship. He said he was trying to be patient and understanding, but that it was hard because I was becoming paranoid, accusing him of nonsensical things, creating problems where there were none. And I saw where this was going. He was laying the groundwork for when I filed for divorce, already planting the seed in everyone's mind that I was unstable, unhinged, and that he was the long-suffering husband putting up with my outbursts. I looked around and saw everyone looking at me with that expression of pity mixed with judgment. Marlene was already shaking her head in disapproval. And that's when Michael said the sentence I will never forget. He said it looking me in the eye with that little smirk, so full of confidence, thinking he had won. He said that I needed to seek professional help because my jealousy and paranoia were destroying our family. And at that exact moment, I stood up from my chair, grabbed my tote bag, walked back to the living room, and started pulling out the folders one by one and placing them on the coffee table. The silence was immediate. Michael stopped talking mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confident to confused in a matter of seconds. I opened the first folder and took out the bank statements. I started to read aloud. Checking account, overdrawn by $8,000. The overdraft limit maxed out. A personal loan for $35,000, 3 months overdue. A MasterCard credit card, a $12,000 limit completely spent on online gambling sites. And I continued, folder after folder, document after document. With each revelation, I watched the color drain from Michael's face. He tried to interrupt me, said I was crazy, that I didn't know what I was talking about, but I just kept going. I picked up the red folder, the one with the forged documents. I showed everyone present how my signature had been falsified on 3 different loan agreements. I explained that this was the crime of fraud, that I had filed a police report and already had a public affidavit absolving me of all these debts. Marlene finally found her voice and said I was exaggerating, that there must be some misunderstanding. And that's when I looked directly at Jessica and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, if she wanted to tell them, or if she'd rather I did. I saw her face turn red, she started to stammer, and I took out my phone, opened the screenshots of her conversations with Michael, and read them aloud. Jessica, transferring $2,000 to him in March, another $3,000 in April, another $1,500 in May, always with messages from him begging, promising to pay it back, making up excuses. Robert, her husband, stood up immediately, snatched the phone from my hand to see for himself, and when he confirmed it was true, he started screaming at Jessica, asking how she could they do that, use their family's money to fund her brother's addiction without telling him. Their argument was so intense, their children started to cry. But I couldn't stop now. I had to finish what I started. I picked up the last folder, the one containing Mark's statement, and read every word aloud. His childhood best friend confirming the gambling addiction, confirming he had lent him money and never got it back, confirming he had pulled away because he couldn't stand to watch Michael destroy himself and drag everyone down with him. It was at that moment that Michael exploded. He screamed that I was a bitch, a traitor, that I had no right to expose his life like that. He lunged at me with a raised fist, and it was his brother-in-law, Robert, who held him back. And even while being restrained, he kept screaming, saying I would pay for this, that I would regret it, that he would destroy my life. And then Marlene did something I never expected. She slapped him across the face, hard, the sound echoing through the entire room, and said in a voice I had never heard before, a voice of deep disappointment and contained rage. She said that he wasn't her son, that her son was dead and had been replaced by this liar and coward. She picked up one of the folders, flipped through the documents with trembling hands, and when she saw the extent of the debts, when she saw the gambling sites, when she saw my forged signature, she began to cry. It wasn't a delicate cry. It was the sound of a heart breaking into pieces. Aunt Beatrice came and hugged me, apologized for all the times she had judged me, for all the times she had taken Michael's side without knowing the truth. And one by one, the other family members started to apologize to me too, except for Jessica, who was busy arguing with her husband, and Michael, who was in the corner of the room, sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears that were streaming down my face, and said I had just one more thing to say. I explained that my lawyer would be serving the divorce papers on Monday morning, that I wanted nothing from him, no assets, no money. I just wanted my freedom and my good name back. I said that he needed professional help for his addiction, but that it was no longer my responsibility. I said that I had spent years being manipulated, humiliated, and played for a fool, while everyone there believed I was the problem, and that now each of them have the complete truth in their hands and could judge for themselves who was right or wrong in this story. I picked up my purse, left all the folders with the documents on the table, and before I left, I turned around one last time and looked at Michael. He was crying, not out of remorse, but out of rage and humiliation. From being exposed in front of everyone, from having lost control of the narrative he had so carefully constructed, and I said only one thing. I said he was right about one thing, that I really did need professional help, but not to treat paranoia or jealousy. I needed help to understand how I had allowed someone to treat me that way for so long, how I had lost so much of myself trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved, and that from this day forward, I would dedicate my energy to rebuilding the strong woman I was before I met him. I walked out of that house into the heaviest silence I have ever experienced, got into my car, which I had parked down the street because I had planned for everything, including having my own way to leave, and as I drove back to my mother's house, where I would be staying until this was all sorted out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief, freedom, dignity. For the first time in a very long time, I was in control of my own life. And even with all the pain, all the anger, all the sadness of what had happened, I knew I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, I had fought for my truth, and that was something no one could ever take from me again. The 3 months that followed that Sunday were the most intense and transformative of my life. I stayed at my mother's house while the divorce proceedings went on, and unlike what I had imagined, Michael didn't contest a thing. He signed all the papers without question, accepted all the conditions. I think he had finally understood that there was no going back, that he had completely lost whatever power he thought he had over me. Marlene called me 2 weeks after that day, crying on the phone, saying she had put Michael into a treatment program for gambling addiction, that she had no idea how serious the situation was, that she felt guilty for all the times she had blamed me when I was actually the victim. I told her I held no grudge, that I understood that mothers always want to protect their children, and that she had been manipulated by him too. She asked for my forgiveness several times, and I forgave her, truly, because holding on to anger would only hurt me more. Aunt Beatrice became an unexpected ally. She would call me every week to see how I was doing, invite me to lunch, include me in the family gatherings that happened without Michael, and this surprised me because I thought that by divorcing him, I would lose that entire family. But I discovered that some of them genuinely cared about me as a person, not just as Michael's wife. Jessica, on the other hand, I never saw again. I heard through the grapevine that she and Robert had also separated because the story about the money she secretly gave her brother was just the tip of the iceberg of other problems in their marriage. As for Michael, he completed the treatment and, according to Marlene, was staying strong in his recovery, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, working to pay off his debts, and for the first time, taking responsibility for his own actions. I hoped he would succeed in his recovery, not for me, but for himself, because no one deserves to live trapped in an addiction that destroys everything around them. But that didn't mean I completely forgave him or forgot what he did. Some wounds heal, but the scars remain, and that's okay. They remind me of how strong I am, of how much I survived. Meanwhile, I started to reconnect with myself. I began therapy twice a week, and it was a painful but necessary process to understand how I had allowed someone to manipulate me for so long, how I had lost my voice, my self esteem, my identity. I discovered I had a tendency to want to save people, to put others' needs before my own, and that this stemmed from childhood traumas I never even knew existed. I worked through each session with dedication. I did the exercises, I faced the uncomfortable truths about myself, and slowly I began to rebuild, not as the woman I was before Michael, but as someone completely new, stronger, more self aware, with clear boundaries and a firm voice. I went back to doing things I had abandoned during the marriage. I started reading for pleasure again, watching the movies I liked, going out with the friends I had neglected all those years. I signed up for yoga classes and discovered that meditation really does help calm the mind. I started writing in a journal every night, processing my feelings, organizing my thoughts, and it was incredible to see how my perspective would change page after page. At work, I went back to being the engaged and creative teacher I had always been. My students noticed the difference. Some even commented that I seemed happier, more present. And it was true. I was present for the first time in years, no longer torn between school and the constant anxiety about what was happening at home, no longer pretending everything was fine when I was crumbling inside. 6 months after the divorce, I managed to rent a small but cozy apartment. It was all mine. Every piece of furniture, every object, every decision was mine. And the feeling of independence was indescribable. I invited my mom and a few friends to help me decorate. We made a party out of it. We painted the walls bright colors, hung up inspiring art, filled the balcony with plants, and when I finally sat on my new sofa, looking at this space that was completely mine, I cried. But this time, they were tears of gratitude and relief. A year after that fateful Sunday, I was a completely different person. I had lost a little weight, not because I was sick, but because I was taking better care of myself. Eating right, exercising, sleeping well. I had changed my haircut, updated my wardrobe, but the most important change was internal. I would look in the mirror and see a woman who liked herself, who respected herself, who would no longer accept being treated as an option or as an escape valve for someone else's problems. I ran into Mark by chance at a supermarket. He recognized me immediately and came over to talk. He thanked me for using his statement respectfully, said he felt relieved to have finally helped someone after failing to help his friend. We talked for a few minutes, and he commented that I looked radiant, that I had a completely different energy. And he was right. I was light, free, at peace. I also came to terms with the idea that it was okay not to be in a relationship, that I didn't need a partner to be whole, that my happiness and my worth didn't depend on having someone by my side. That was one of the most important lessons I learned. For so long, I had defined my identity as Michael's wife, as half of a couple. And when that ended, I had to rediscover who I was on my own. And I discovered that I was amazing, that I had my own dreams, my own goals, a whole life ahead of me full of possibilities. I started planning things I had always wanted to do but had put off. I enrolled in a professional development course I was always interested in. I planned an international trip I had always dreamed of. I opened a savings account and started putting money away, not for emergencies or to cover debts, but to make my dreams come true. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. As for my finances, I managed to escape the situation completely unscathed. The public affidavit and all the documentation I prepared protected me legally. None of Michael's debts remained in my name, and bit by bit, I rebuilt my financial stability. I wasn't rich, but I was stable, and more importantly, it was honest, earned through my own hard work. Looking back now, I see that that terrible experience was also a gift in disguise. It forced me to grow, to take a stand, to fight for myself in a way I might never have if everything had remained in the comfort zone of mediocrity. It taught me that love isn't about sacrificing who you are to make someone else happy. It's not about ignoring red flags or accepting crumbs of affection. True love is about partnership, mutual respect, honesty, growing together. And that I deserved nothing less than that. I also learned the importance of having a support network, of not trying to carry everything alone. My mother, my therapist, my friends, even people I barely knew but who sympathized with my story, they were all essential to my recovery. And today, I try to be that support for other people. When I see a friend or colleague in a troubled relationship, I share my story, not in an intrusive way, by making it clear that there are ways out, that it is possible to start over, that no one has to stay in a situation that is destroying them out of fear or shame. There's something my therapist told me that I'll never forget. She said that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And that's exactly what I did. I was afraid at every step of the process, afraid of being wrong, afraid of being alone, afraid of not being able to survive financially, afraid of being judged. But I acted anyway, and that made all the difference. Today, 2 years after that Sunday, I can say with absolute certainty that I am happy, genuinely happy. I wake up every day grateful for the life I've built, for the apartment that is my sanctuary, for the job that fulfills me, for the independence I've earned, for the lessons I've learned, and above all, for having found myself again, for having rescued the strong, determined woman who was always inside me, but who had been lying dormant under layers of manipulation and emotional abuse. I don't know what the future holds. If I'll fall in love again, if I'll build a new family, if I'll continue on my own enjoying my freedom. And the truth is, I don't need to know right now. I'm living one day at a time, enjoying every moment, celebrating every small victory. And that is more than enough. My story isn't about revenge, it's about justice, about self-preservation, about having the courage to defend your own dignity when everyone around you is telling you to accept the unacceptable. It's about choosing yourself when it would be easier to keep being chosen last. And it's about understanding that starting over isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of strength. And now I want to hear from you who are watching. Have you ever been through something similar in your life? Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship where you were being manipulated, where your legitimate concerns were twisted into paranoia, where you were made to feel guilty for problems you didn't create? Or perhaps you know someone who is living this right now, someone you love who is being slowly destroyed by an addicted, abusive, or manipulative partner? Leave your story in the comments, your experience, or if you prefer, just a word of support. Because this is a community of acceptance and strength. There is no judgment here, only understanding and a genuine desire to help one another. And if my story resonated with you, if you recognized patterns in your own life, I want you to know something very important. You are not alone. There is help available. There is a way out. But even more importantly, I want to encourage you to seek spiritual help, to draw closer to God, to place your faith in Jesus Christ, because He was the one who gave me strength when I thought I had none left. It was through prayer and faith that I found the mental clarity to make the right decisions, the courage to face my fears, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait. Find a church, a Christian faith community near you, a place where you can feel welcomed, spiritually supported, where you can hear the Word of God and allow it to transform your heart and your mind. Because as essential as therapy is, as fundamental as the support of friends and family is, there is a spiritual dimension to healing that only faith can fill. There is a peace that only God can give, a strength that only comes from trusting that He has a greater purpose for your life, even when everything seems to be falling apart. In the most difficult moments of my journey, it was prayer that sustained me. It was the Bible verses I would read in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep that reminded me I was loved, valued, deserving of good things, and that God would never abandon me. If you are in a situation of abuse, manipulation, a partner's addiction, hidden debts, anything that is destroying your peace and your life, know that God sees your suffering, knows your tears, and is ready to help you get out of it. But you have to take the first step. You have to have the courage to ask for help, to seek spiritual guidance, to connect with a community that will support you and remind you of who you truly are in God's eyes. Don't remain in silence. Don't carry this weight alone. Share it with people you trust, with spiritual leaders, with trained professionals, because you deserve to live in peace. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to have healthy relationships based on respect and true love. And all of this is possible when you put God at the center of your life and allow Him to guide your steps. I know it seems scary, that taking the first step to leave an abusive or toxic situation is terrifying. I've been through it. I know exactly what it's like. But I also know that on the other side, there is life, there is joy, there is freedom. And it is worth every second of fear and uncertainty you will feel in the process. So, my final invitation to you is this: don't give up on yourself. Don't accept living a mediocre life full of lies and suffering because you're afraid to start over. You are stronger than you think, more capable than you believe. And with God by your side, there is no obstacle that cannot be overcome. Find a church, talk to a pastor or spiritual leader, join prayer groups and Bible studies. Allow yourself to be part of a spiritual family that will welcome you, pray for you, and walk beside you on this journey of healing and reconstruction. And if you've already been through something similar and came out victorious on the other side like I did, leave your testimony in the comments. Share your strength with those who are still fighting, because your words might be exactly what someone needs to hear today to find the courage to change. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell to receive alerts for new videos. Leave a like so that this message can reach more people. And share it with someone you think needs to hear this. Every view, every comment, every share could save a life, could give hope to someone who is lost. And that is my mission here: to use my story, my pain, transformed into strength, to help other people find their way back to themselves and to God. Thank you so much for watching this far, for accompanying me on this intense and emotional journey, for being part of this incredible community. May God bless each and every one of you. May He light your paths, heal your wounds, restore your dreams, and may you never forget how valuable and loved you are. A huge hug until the next video, and always remember, you are not alone. God is with you, and we are here too, rooting for your victory, for your happiness, for your peace. God bless, and I'll see you soon.